Good morning, happy Hanukkah. So a reminder to please click subscribe. Help spread Chasidus to the, billions of viewers on the users on YouTube, or millions. We're in the middle of a discussion about the idea of Hanukkah, more specifically, why it's done through candles, where all the other holidays that we have commemorating miracles and things that have happened to us, it's about food, whether it's matzah or it is having a feast on Purim. There's various different types of physical celebrations. Hanukkah, it's more of a spiritual thing. A candle, although it's physical, but fire is probably the closest spiritual matter or physical, the most spiritual physical thing that we have, whether it's gas but fire has a lot of qualities that are like spirituality. You don't lose by igniting someone else. It's not a commodity that decreases as you share it. A little light dispels a lot of darkness. A lot of different reasons or examples where you see that fire has this element to it. To understand why Hanukkah is different, we need to look at what a candle and a flame represent. Shlomo Melech in Ecclesiastes tells us that ner mitzvah v'Torah candle is the mitzvah and Torah is the light. We also have a reference that the neshama is a candle. Before the neshama came down into this world, and Rabbi seems to be talking about this a lot, the neshama was, and still is, but it was much more felt. It was a flame that was yearning and constantly going towards Hashem with a very deep love. We got into discussion that mitzvahs don't have reasons to them. It's what Hashem wants. And the comparison between a menorah and the Jewish people is that a menorah has to be made out of one unit, one block of gold. That's how it was in the Beis HaMikdash in the temple. This block was then divided or chiseled out to have seven branches. Similarly, the Jewish people, we're one block or one unit, our souls, and then it gets divided into seven. But really, that's in a very, very general way. In a more specific way, if you look at the details, if you will, when the Jewish people came into Mitzrayim, it was 70 people, the original 70 that came. Those 70 is a multiplication of the seven branches. Within those 70, there were 600,000 sparks of neshamas. There's these units of souls, which are 600,000. Of those, in each one of those 600,000, there are another 600,000. We tried to do the math, how many zeros, or we didn't try, you did the math, how many zeros it was, and so on. But if we trace it back, it goes back to seven. There's seven shepherds of the Jewish people. Aaron HaKohen, who his mitzvah was to light the menorah, he is one of these seven. Now, when it comes to lighting the menorah, there are two expressions. It says, Bahalois Aaron, when he lifts up, which was at night, he lifts up the menorah, is a way that Torah describes the igniting of the menorah. And Behetiva Yasaneres, when he prepares the candles. Also a description of lighting it, but it's part of the process where you. So to understand this double term and how it applies to Aaron, how it applies to the Jewish people being a menorah, and how on the one hand we're myriads and 600,000, multiply 600,000 and so on of souls, but at the same time, it's one block. It goes back to one menorah, which is really one block, but divided in seven or has seven branches to the same menorah. All these pieces are not coincidental, but to understand this, we need to appreciate the two types of fires. There's a fire that comes from above and a fire that comes from below. There's a love which is initiated by the other side that's expressing love, and then there's a love that comes from us, where we're trying to love in our relationship to Hashem. And whenever we talk about these things, it's the pasuk says, which means from my flesh I see godliness. So the human design is a format that works throughout creation, spiritual worlds and physical worlds, the 10-prong, 10-level system of spheres. So when we talk about emotions or love between people, or love between us and Hashem, they're reflective in obviously in appropriate analogies, but they're reflective in the human as well. And the more we understand ourselves, the more we understand Hashem, or I was going to say, the more we understand Hashem, the more we understand how we operate. But we find an example of this is that even though when the Jewish people brought a carbon on the Mizbeach, a fire would come from Shemayim and would consume it. Nonetheless, it's a mitzvah to bring Mina Hedyet from the human or the small one in a non-miraculous way, literally light a fire and put it onto the Mizbeach. So we have these two parts. On the one hand, Hashem is flooding us with His love, and we get swept away. On the other hand, we're required to work on ourselves and bring out this love from within us. One of the ways that this is done, that's the mitzvah of ve'ahavta. You have to love Hashem, right? And we know the famous question: how do you command someone to love? If I do, I do. If I don't, I don't. You can tell me be nice, even though you don't love. You can't tell me that you have to love. If I don't feel like it, I don't feel it. But of course, the answer is that you need to think about certain things. And this is in our relationship with Hashem. A person needs to reflect on the greatness of Hashem. In this mimer, he's sharing that a person thinks about how great Hashem is in reference to the rest of the world. So you see spiritual worlds which have angels, and there's levels of angels: malachim, srafim, chayis hakodesh, efanim, various different spiritual beings, if you will, not gods, heaven forbid, but they have the I guess distinction of humans is that they're fully focused on spirituality, and they're nullified and subservient to Hashem, and they're praising Hashem, and all they want is Hashem. When you think about how Hashem created all these worlds, and even spiritual beings are in awe of Him, it brings out a love from us to Hashem. The more you realize Hashem's greatness, the more you want to love. That's in general, a person sees how something is good, they want it. And that's why in Shema we say Shema v'ahavta, which is you should love Hashem. But between the Shema and v'ahavta, you have Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Le'olam Vad, because Malchus is this level of Hashem connecting with the worlds, but in a way that He's in charge of the worlds, and the worlds realize that. The more a person contemplates it, the more he feels a feeling for Hashem. Now, it's easy for us to say it in one line, but this is to a great extent what Chasidus represents, is reflection, contemplation. What's davening all about? Davening is the whole process, if done right, of a person is coming to Shema through contemplation, which is through the words of King David, of Tehillim, which a lot of it is davening, through the descriptions of the angels and other spiritual beings in their praising Hashem. As a person is not just saying words, but thinking about the meaning and reflecting on the concept, by the time he gets to Shema, he actually has a love for Hashem. It's real. That's how it's supposed to be. Okay. So we are, it's page Lamed Beis Amud Gimel, which is page 64. We'll start from the top line. That's why our sages have established that we should say Baruch Shem before Ve'ahavta, because that's the idea to think about that concept. Because we say in Baruch Shamar Yachid Chei Ha'olamim Melech, the words are very specific, so I'll translate. Yachid Chei Ha'olamim Melech Meshuach Mefei Adei Shmei Agadol. The only one, Chei Ha'ilamim, the life of the worlds, meaning the life source of the worlds. Melech Meshubach, a king which is praised and Mefor and beautified. Adei Ad, forever. Shmei HaGadol is his name, his great name. Which great name means not just his name, but everything that comes from him. Now, let's take that apart. Yachid, he's the only one. Pirush Yachid, L'mayla M'chinas Echad. There are two ways to say one. You could say the only one, and you could say one. The minus of saying one is that it implies that there's a two and a three. If you say the only one, which in Hebrew that would mean Yachid, that means there's nothing else besides him. Now, in Shema, we say Echad. And obviously, there is nothing else besides Hashem. So why do we use a term of Echad, which God forbid could imply that there are more than one Eibishter, which would be, of course, heresy and inaccurate. So the idea is, it's beyond the scope of this mimer, but the idea is that we're trying to say that the entire world, which looks like there's many things going on, is all included in Hashem. Hashem is the only thing that really exists. If you say only, you're not unifying anything. You're saying there is nothing else. And the process of Shema, especially the word Echad, is comprised of three letters, Aleph, Ches, Daled. One means one Hashem. Ches are the seven heavens and one earth. That's 8. And Daled are the 4 sides of the world. So when I say Echad, I'm really supposed to be reflecting on the concept that everything that's here is all included in Hashem, but not in a way that the world doesn't exist. There's a world. It's just not its own entity. If you say Yachid, you're not realizing the unification of the rest of the world. So, but the point here is that when you say Yachid versus Echad, Yachid is a stronger description of unity and of oneness than Echad is. Pirush Yachid, u'lemayla m'chinas Echad. Yachid means is greater than the level of Echad. Pirush Echad, what does Echad mean? So our sages tell us, he's one in the heavens, in the earth, and in the 4 sides of the world. So we're trying to say, you see this world around you? It's all one. If you say it's the only one, there's no world, which is a great level to reach, but we have to first, excuse me, Chaim. We have to first reach an appreciation that the rest of the world, from our eyes, is really only Hashem.
First understand God in the multiplicity before you can understand God in the unity.
Correct. But I would be very careful using the term multiplicity regarding Hashem. But if davening is a process to take us somewhere, to have a love for Hashem, part of that is to say, there's nothing else besides Hashem. But I'm a human. So I could be in denial and say, there's no world, there's no people, there's no nothing, everything's Hashem, Hashem, Hashem. Fine. But you didn't reach anything. You just denied everything. You escaped reality. And it is reality. It's just we're not holding there. We're not on that level. The Echad says, see this world that I see? It means my physical life and my responsibilities and my worries and all my other things together. It's really all one. It's all Hashem. If I say Yachid, the only one, that means these things don't exist. So you're not working with it, you're just escaping it. So what he wants to say here, he's going to focus on the Yachid part. To understand the Yachid, we need to appreciate what's Echad. Echad, as he says, he's one Eibishter in the heavens and the earth, which seem real to us, Ubidal Ruchei Sa'ilam, and in the 4 sides of the world. Because all the worlds, Al Yonim, the higher worlds, Einam Tevsim Makim, even though you would think spiritual worlds, angels, Srafim, Chayes, etc., they don't take up any space. They're not their own entities. They have no ego. The Kula Kameh, and this whole entire existence is like nothing for Hashem. There's nothing else besides Him. So the reason why we're calling it Echad, one, is because when you compare it against all the other worlds, right, which we're trying to do that, not because they're real, but because we want to inculcate within ourselves a feeling that everything is really Hashem. So when you compare it to all the other worlds, then you say, there's only one thing. Okay, it's a nuanced difference, but it's important. The end goal is the same. We need to realize that nothing else matters. Okay, so you could just take me away from everything else, which is Yachid, and I didn't reach that level. I just denied it, and at some point, I'm not holding there, so it creeps up on me, and then I start to think there's other things that matter, even though they don't. But that's not what Shema is. Shema is a process of recognizing that the only thing that matters is Hashem. So that's Echad. Aval Yachid, but when you use the word Yachid, by the way, just welcome to all those that are watching. Thanks for being here, and if you have any questions, you can put it in the comments. We'll try to address it. But Yachid means that he's the only one, Umiyuchad, the only one b'fnei atzmei on his own. He is on his own, and there is nothing else in the worlds that even have any validity or existence to them. And when you say the life of the worlds, King, Pirush, Shekol, Chayes, Ha'ilamayis, all of the sustenance, the energy, the life source of the worlds. Shemechayes, Kulam, that Hashem sustains all of it. Umahaves, Kulam, and He's making all of them come into being. El Yoinim, V'tachteinim, the higher and the lower. It's only because he's king. The kulam ekalam chayes v'chenes machosei yisbarich. What he says is like this: Chei ha'olam melech is Hashem is the only one. That's what we're saying in Baruch Shalom. Before we start davening, Hashem is the only one, and everything else that's going on in this world is because Hashem is being king, and as a king, He's providing for everything else. In other words, He's creating everything else and giving it the feeling, or giving us the feeling, that those things that we see are their own entity, for the sole purpose, obviously, that we use them, but that we, despite them, realize that it's only Hashem. So, if you have and it's hard for us to relate because we don't have kings today in that manner. But when there used to be kings and they were all powerful, the person has nothing. He has no rights, he has no abilities, everything comes from the king. It doesn't mean that he's equal to the king. The king decides to sustain him. Okay, today we live in a democracy and the world has come a long way, it's very different. But actually there was several older Chassidim that when the Tsar died, they cried. And the Tsar wasn't a friend of the Jews. What are you crying about? They cried, and they said because we lost the analogy that's in Chasidus so often between our relationship to Hashem and how we look at Him. It's always king, king, king. This is basically the last one around. There's no. We lost the ability to truly understand Chasidus. But throughout davening and David HaMelech and so on, Tillim, we always have these references to king, king, king. Yachad Chaylam Melech is Hashem is the only one, and He's the sustenance of the whole world in a manner of Melech. Kabbalistically, it represents going through Malchus, which is the lowest level of transmission, but it's telling us two things at the same time. There's a world, but it's nothing. It doesn't have its own entity. Okay. And also this, that He is praised and beautified. What's the praise of Hashem? They, the angels and the Seraphim and the Chayes and the Fani HaKodesh, they grasp the greatness of Hashem. Because to Hashem's greatness, we say in Ashrei, there is no fathoming Hashem's greatness. You can never realize how great Hashem is. He's infinite, we're finite. And once you go higher in the higher spiritual worlds, there is praise upon praise. You're never going to reach the level that you could truly describe what Hashem is. The Ilu Yachad Ilu, and one high level above a higher level, ad ein kates ve'ein tachlis, to no limit and no end. It's infinite. The Hakoil and all this, who ba'avur Shmei Agadol, for Hashem's great name, because all these high worlds that we're, so to speak, fascinated about, all they're called is Hashem's name. Your name is not you. It's a description. It's not your essence. It may represent your essence. It may be a way to identify your essence, but it's not your essence. It's just a description. Right? So all these great things that we tried in some way to describe, to explain, to say what Hashem really is, all it is just His name. And His kingship, which is a manner of how He's expressive, Aleim Bovad, that's all it is. You can't reach, can't touch His essence and His true existence at all. Because there's no mind that could grasp Hashem, right? Because Hashem is infinite, we're finite. Because He's the only one, the unified one, the Niskav and exalted Shmei Levada, even His name is exalted. Let's take a moment and just understand. When we say in Ashrei, 3 times a day, to Hashem's greatness, there's no fathoming. So Alter Rebbe here has 4 lines explaining what that means. That as much as we think, and the whole davening is praising Hashem, you're not beginning to understand, because it's higher than our understanding. It's almost like you could understand that you can't understand, which is a level to reach, right? That's how you get love or awe for something, because you realize it's beyond.
Humility.
Yeah, you realize it's beyond your scope. But if you achieve that through reflection, that's where the emotions come from. That's the point of davening. And then he says, Malchus Malchus Kol Olam. Hashem's royalty, his Malchus, is the Malchus of all the worlds. Which is again part of Asher. The person thinks about, okay, what's Malchus? It's Hashem's kingship. It's the kingship of all the worlds, which means all it is the world. It's not really him himself and so on. This is what it means. In the place where you find Hashem's greatness, that's where you find his humility. Because on the one hand, he's so great, he's beyond anything. At the same time, he's creating a world using Malchus. Means he cares enough and he's kind enough for us. Usually, in the human interactions, the greater someone is, usually doesn't go together with humility. They're opposite feelings. It doesn't have to be a deficiency. It's different. I don't know. Does the president have to be humble? It's probably helpful, but I think his goal is to have any president is to have a leadership attitude and force, so on and so forth. We know of Chasidus and from Torah that humility is very important. Moshe Rabbeinu was the most humble person that ever lived, and so on. But it's still counterintuitive. The greater, almost, we're saying that where you see Hashem's greatness, that's where you're going to see his humility, which is an amazing concept. Koyach.